Hey guys, good morning everybody, good afternoon, good evening, depending on wherever you're joining us this beautiful day. You're welcome to Diary of Hackers, Diary 6.0, and we are privileged to have in the house a cybersecurity professional, the on cyber diplomacy, person of Elizabeth Wuraola Kolade. Ladies and gentlemen, we're all welcome. So, you're welcome, Ma. Thank you very much for joining us on Diary of Hackers. You have the floor, Ma.
All right. Thank you very much, Joshua. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you
I just
very
need some.
clear.
All right. Okay. So I'll just go right into. I'll just go right into the presentation. It's going to be a very quick one. Can we see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning to discuss this very, very important topic. My name is Elizabeth Kolade, as I was rightly introduced. First, I would like to say thank you to the people behind Diary of Hackers for coming up with this amazing initiative to promote learning within the cybersecurity community. Um, as I rightly said, my name is Elizabeth Kolade, Elizabeth Wuraola Kolade, also known as the Cyber Wura. I'm an all-round tech enthusiast. I currently work as a cybersecurity analyst. I'm an incident responder. I currently lead a CERT team. I have while I work in operations, I have great interest in diplomacy, and I've been following diplomacy for a couple of years now. And I'm glad to be giving this talk this morning. And I'm the digital safety advocate. As was rightly said when he was reading my profile, I believe cybersecurity begins with the person who sits behind the computer. So I'm an avid promoter of cybersecurity awareness and ensuring people are armed with the right knowledge as they operate as digital citizens. And this is what I look like. So let's go straight into our topic for discussion this morning. I understand a large percentage of our attendees here are pretty much students. I understand that we have people who are not students, but I would like to break it down. We're talking about cyber diplomacy this morning. This is a pretty new aspect of cybersecurity that not so many people are aware of at this point, and I'd like to throw more light on it. First, what is cyber diplomacy? It's a combination of two words. We have cyber and we have diplomacy. Most of us here are very familiar with what I mean when I talk about the cyber domain. It's pretty much anything relating or involving computer or networks. And then going to diplomacy, which is the part that I believe is quite new to quite a number of people. Diplomacy is simply the skill in dealing with people. I know in our day-to-day interactions, when we do something, someone says, "Oh, you're so diplomatic," and all of that. It's basically the skill in handling affairs without arousing hostility, ensuring everybody comes to an agreement. In the context of cyber diplomacy that we're talking about this morning, it's the art or practice of conducting international relations as it relates to negotiating alliances, treaties, and agreements. Moving forward, now cyber diplomacy, as we are discussing this morning, is the use of diplomatic tools and diplomatic thinking to solve the problems from the cyberspace. Over the years, we have experienced the emergence of new technologies. We have experienced adoption across different states, across different industries. And one way or the other, this has affected and reshaped our societies, our economies, international relations. And it has forced countries to realize the importance of cyberspace, because most of our dealings these days has one in one way or the other is connected with technology. So when we talk about cyber diplomacy, sorry, when we talk about the adoption of technology, we have issues that come up, issues as it relates to privacy, issues as it relates to internet freedom, the development of new technologies, what is the implication of adopting these new technologies, issues as it relates to internet governance, the military use of the internet. There was a time where war was a physical battle, and now we have, over the years, we have seen it develop. Now we have technology that has been adopted into everything that we do. And one way or the other, we have seen countries express that they have the technological ability to go into war and all of that. We also have to discuss issues as it relates to innovation and economic growth. These are things that affect our countries and indirectly affect us as individuals. So when we talk about cyber diplomacy, it's simply countries wanting to have a say in how all of this happens. As this new development comes, somebody needs to make the rules and all of that. And it is important that when you make a rule for a domain, it is important that every participant of that particular domain is aware and has a say in what is going on. So as we have all of these issues, I'm sure we will agree with me that while cyberspace has come with all of its benefits, as I had highlighted, it also comes with its own risk. So why is cyber diplomacy important? The emergence of new trends and threats. There are some things who would have thought that ransomware is going to be a thing right now. Who would have thought that phishing was going to be a thing? All that used to happen was, I have a letter to send, I'm just going to write it and go to the post office and send it, and nobody was going to ask me. There's no how someone will ask me to click on a link from a paper and all of that. So we have new trends that have come up, and they have their associated threats that come with them. Cyber diplomacy is important because this is how we build strategic partnerships with other countries. As we progress, you're going to understand what I mean by building partnerships with other countries. This is how we have multilateral engagements. It's important that we share information. We confront the common enemy and have collective action against waste technology and adopt technology one way or the other. And as different sectors and different countries adopt this technology, we effectively and address this common enemy. Cyber diplomacy is a way to bring together like-minded groups on important issues as it relates to cybersecurity. There are some things that individually do not exactly look like a big deal, but when we have people who think along this line come together for cyber diplomacy, that's how we come out some national and global initiatives as it affects the cyberspace. To myself, Joshua, can anybody just give me a sign
Okay.
or something?
All right. Yeah, we can hear you, ma.
Okay, you can hear me.
Yeah, very well.
All right, then I'll just proceed. So when we talk about cyber diplomacy, how are issues on cyber diplomacy being addressed? How to strike deals, knowing how to interact with people, engage people, and avoid conflicts and all of that. So there's a lot of talks and discussions and engagements. This is how issues as it relates to cyber diplomacy is being addressed. And also when we want to discuss issues as it relates to cyber diplomacy, referring to some of the things I had mentioned earlier, there are some things that we need to come to an agreement on. For example, what's our collective definition on certain things? Like when we say an attack has happened, what defines an attack? What makes it an attack? If another country is spying into the technological infrastructure of another country, let's say of a country who doesn't exactly have ability to protect its infrastructure. Where do we draw the line? Where do we say, oh, you have crossed the line, you have done this, you shouldn't have done that, and all of that? We need to establish that, oh, one country is not using computers or devices in another country to execute some of its malware and all that, and recruiting computers from other countries as botnets. We need to set limits on how countries exploit vulnerabilities and all of that. I'm going to talk about exploiting vulnerabilities much later. And also, table of cyber diplomacy. That's where we come up with international laws, norms, resolutions, policies, and all of that that help to govern the cyberspace. Because the way technology is evolving these days, it is very important that we have some guidelines that guide us on how we carry out some of the activities that we carry out. A domain or a space that has no law is bound for doom. Now, talking about cyber diplomacy, it might seem abstract, but where are issues on cyber diplomacy? Where is it being attended to? Where is it being discussed? The United Nations has different angles, different departments and units that handle issues as it relates to cyber diplomacy. There are different ways. We have the International Telecommunication Unit has to address some issues as it relates to the kind of technology that is being adopted and all of that. United Nations Office of Disarmament Affairs has to address and carry out further research and have engagement on how we are using some of these technologies. Need to make projections on what future threats are, and basically just research on how they can help to contain some of this situation. We have the organization now the UN is like a bigger body that addresses all of this, and then we have some other like regional body and association that helps all of this. We have the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, that's the OSCE. We have the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, the ASEAN, Organization of American States, Group of Seven, and the G20. I missed something very important. So my name is the African Union. However, in December 2018, while this issue has been discussed low-key and all of that, much attention was given the United Nations as the organization responsible for ensuring peace in the world, gave it a frontline attention. The United Nations creation of different groups to explore issues related to responsible state behavior in cyberspace. Yeah, started in June 2019, and they're going to be this year. The responsibility of the open-ended working group was to discuss on norms, rules, and principles of responsible state behavior and ways to implement them. They also have a task to study existing and potential threats to information security and possible confidence building and capacity building measures. I'm going to stress on confidence building. I know it's not something that some of us are familiar with. We have this, we call them non-state actors, so-called faceless actors that go all the way, very skilled, that try to bring down critical infrastructures of different states. While some are state-sponsored, some act on their own. They are pretty much what we know as hackers, what we know in our everyday lives as hackers. The open-ended working group is also responsible for bringing concepts for securing global IT systems. The OEWG is to establish institutional dialogue with the United Nations, and the OEWG is to involve all interested UN member states. The OEWG pretty much brings everybody together. If you're familiar with the UN proceedings, you know that the UN conversations at the UN, most of these conversations are high level and all of that. But the OEWG has a mandate to actually involve everybody, because the cyber domain is a very, very, very peculiar one, and it is very, very important that you capture all sides. For example, the OEWG in December 2019, they had an intersessional meeting where they brought together member states. Basically, the OEWG is open to everybody who is interested. Member states, they brought together the private sector, brought together. Now, moving on to the group of government experts, the GGE is different. The GGE is not for everybody. I'm going to explain that. The task of the GGE is to examine the impact of development in ICT on national security and military affairs. There is so much emphasis on military affairs and how cyberspace is used military. The GE initially established in 2014. Six group of government is sitting from 2019 to 2021. Yeah, that's for a 3-year period. And their task is to examine the impact of development and also talk about responsible state behavior. The GGE introduced the principle that international law applies to digital space. I had mentioned that we have a common enemy. With the way we adopt technology, we have new technological solutions coming out, how some of our processes as a country is dependent on technology. So one of the pillars of the report of the GGE was to identify existing and emerging threats. I also mentioned that the GGE was able to establish that international law applies to the use of ICT because of the peculiarity of the, because of the peculiarity of the cyberspace. It's very important that there are guidelines in place that instruct people on how to do certain things and how not to do certain things. An example as it relates to data. Data is a very, very important part of our current existence. We have the GDPR, that's for the European Union region. Here in Africa, we also have the African Union Data Protection Regulation or something like that. So these are just examples of some of the laws. We also have norms, rules, and principles for responsible state behavior. I'm going to elaborate on these norms extensively. We have confidence-building measures, and also talk about how international cooperation and assistance in security and capacity building. I'm going to elaborate on confidence building measures, and I'm going to talk about how international cooperation and assistance is important. So now, moving on to the norms I talked about from the GGE report. The United Nations has adopted 11 norms from the report of the GGE. The GGE tendered more norms, but this is what was accepted and passed. Let me briefly explain what norms are. Norms are pretty much guidelines that say, oh, this is what you should and what you should do. This is what you can do and what you cannot do. For example, when we have physical war, we have norms that guide physical war. Norms that says you shouldn't attack hospitals, you shouldn't attack places of worship, you shouldn't attack schools and all of that. While countries these are important elements that needs to be preserved. So we also have this in the cyberspace. One of the norms is interstate cooperation on security. Would agree with me that cybersecurity, collaboration and cooperation in cybersecurity is very important. So the UN promotes cooperation at state level. I've been using state. When I say state here, I'm talking about countries, states, about non-states. Those are non-state acts, those we refer to as hackers and all of that. The second norm is to consider all relevant information in the case of an incident. Prevent misuse of ICT in your territory. So we are familiar with the issue of jurisdiction and territories as it relates to cybersecurity. I know we've heard that cybersecurity is borderless. There are issues as to how to prosecute somebody when a cybersecurity incident occurs, because if it doesn't happen within your country, if the attack originated from another country, how do you prosecute the person in the other country? So countries have a responsibility to ensure that the technology infrastructure in their domain, in their country, is not misused. They have a responsibility to ensure that they do not use it against another country and ensure that the people within their domain are not misusing this technology. Another norm is to cooperate to exchange information to stop crime and terrorism. I mentioned that we have a common enemy, so countries are encouraged to cooperate. Respecting human rights and privacy. Privacy is a very, very, very big issue right now with the way we have a lot of data flowing around. We have people interacting with the internet, with various devices, and all of that. Another norm is to not damage critical infrastructure. I had mentioned how in physical world there are some war norms that says what we can and what we shouldn't do. It also applies to the cyber domain. Even though the norm says do not attack critical infrastructures like the hospitals, banks, and electrical grids, we have seen in very recent times how hospitals have been attacked. For example, the WannaCry in 2018, how it affected hospitals and all of that. Now, this can be, even though the attack was targeted at Ukraine, yeah, it was targeted at Ukraine, and it was rumored to have started from Russia. It hit the whole world, and we see how it affected organizations and all of that. But one of the sectors that was really hit was hospitals. Now we can, while Russia is named to it, it's possible that there were some activists within Russia that actually put out this ransomware that crippled the entire world and all of that. So this, in this scenario that I've just highlighted, this is where we have the norm that says countries have a responsibility to prevent the misuse of ICT. Another norm is states have a responsibility to respond to requests for assistance. Now, let's say a lower country, a country that doesn't have the required capacity to protect its infrastructure, in the event that it's under to actually come in and help them. Ensure supply chain security. Now, I like this one very much. Talking about supply chain security. For example, I know we are familiar with the TikTok app and the conversations that have been going on about talking about critical infrastructure. If this norm was added to, we wouldn't have had the issue we had with WannaCry, where it primarily affected, it affected other organizations, primarily affected hospitals and all that, preventing the misuse of ICT in the territory. So an example on preventing misuse, countries have a responsibility in ensuring that the internet services, devices within their territory are not being misused. I remember I was given a scenario in trying to do to stop, like the first was warning me that what I was about to do was not allowed, and then I proceeded. And the second warning was asking me to actually stop what I was doing. So even though my target wasn't an organization per se, but he recognized the action as a malicious act, and I was being sanctioned for that. I was asked to stop that. Though this one way they were able to do that was because they monitored the internet traffic within their territory. Though this hampers on the issue of human rights and privacy. But then it is what it is. Those are the guidelines that they have put out in their domain, and it's important that people adhere to it. So every country is expected to adhere to these norms as provided by the United Nations. If these norms are being adhered to, we'll have a much more safer and secure cyberspace. But then we know what it is right now. The UN is just trying to contain some of these things. We also have some different organizations that have put up norms, but the major issue we have is not setting out norms. It's actually countries adhering to these norms and then these norms being implemented. Moving ahead, okay, yeah, I said I was going to stress on confidence building measures. Basically, what are confidence building measures? Confidence building measures are actions taken to reduce fear of attack by. All right. So I was talking on confidence building measures and how it's basically different parties coming together to have an understanding. I cited an example. Let's say US and Russia come together and we come to an agreement. Provide cyberspace is not good for my economy as a nation. It's not good for your economy as a nation. It's not good for your economy as a nation. So we come to an agreement that says, okay, we're not going to try and exploit each other, and we try to emphasize some level of trust between ourselves. So this is basically what confidence building measures are, and this is where cyber diplomacy comes in. Now, confidence building measures as it relates to cyber security, this is where cyber diplomacy comes in. This is where these conversations are being had. Confidence building measure is related to capacity building because these two countries I stated in my example, Russia and the US, if, for instance, the US doesn't have the capability to protect its digital infrastructure, it cannot go and strike it doesn't even make sense to go and strike an understanding with a country that is way ahead of you and saying, okay, I'm not going to attack. What do you want to attack when you cannot even protect your own infrastructure? And then how do you ensure that when you cannot protect, you cannot effectively monitor, how do you ensure that you yourself are not being compromised and all of that? So capacity building is tied to confidence building measures. Some states do not have the capacity to protect itself, and therefore they cannot express trust in another country. During the intersessional meeting in 2019 by the OEWG, this issue on capacity building as it relates to confidence building was raised, and some organizations and states expressed interest in helping nation states build capacity. So I think this is a welcome development, though since then there have been conversation on how to match the need with resources and all of that. I believe that's something that the UN is on top of. It's going to make a lot of sense if, even though it's not exactly feasible, but if different states and countries have the capacity to an extent, it's going to help in ensuring CBMs. CBMs exist at regional levels. CBMs and capacity building at regional level is a way to record effectiveness. Talking about regional level, what I mean by regional level, like the African Union, the European Union. Yes, while countries are striking deals across borders, it's important that we address it from within. So there are CBMs at regional levels. For example, let's use the issue of visa. We're in Nigeria. If you're going to another West African country, you do not need a visa to go to that country. You can just go with your passport and then you just walk in because you have been classified as West Africa, and these countries within West Africa have an understanding. So that's pretty much what these CBMs at regional level looks like. So I'm getting to the end of my presentation. As I mentioned earlier, I was made to understand that a good percentage of attendees here are students or pretty much people starting out a career in cybersecurity. So I'm going to talk on considering a career in cyber diplomacy. It's not something that so many people are familiar with. There are very, very few cyber diplomats in the world. I think Estonia is one of the leading countries. The cyber diplomat for Estonia, I've forgotten what the name of her office is, but she has an office. I think her name is Heli or something. She has an office, and you see Estonia at the forefront of things like this because they've been hit with serious issues in 2007. In 2007, Estonia experienced what we like to call the first cyber attack. You can go ahead and read about it. In Tallinn, just go ahead and read about it. So basically, the importance of diplomats is becoming obvious because we have come to realize the importance of the cyber domain in general. We have come to realize the possibilities. We have seen how some countries have demonstrated that they have offensive cyber capabilities. And we don't want to get to that point right now. At least not now. I know we're going to get there eventually, but not now, not in the state of things, not in the current situation of the entire world. So cyber diplomats have become very important. We see how countries, I know we hear in the news on how two countries were at war, and all of a sudden you just come and hear in the news and say, oh, these countries have come to a truce, they've agreed that they're going to stop the war and all that. The people who go and have these conversations to bring about this resolution, they are called diplomats. So in the area of cybersecurity, we now have what we call diplomats, people going to strike deals and have conversations. Um, why should you consider a career in cyber diplomacy? Basically, ask yourself this question: who is at the table to represent your group or country when decisions that affect you and the work you do is being taken? It's very, very important. If somebody goes ahead to make a rule for you that is not favorable, it's going to affect what you do, your day-to-day operations. For me, I work in operations. I'm an incident responder. I work in a CERT team. So I'm very, very interested in diplomatic issues. I'm interested in, I'm interested in global conversations on cybersecurity. I want to know what's happening all over the world. I want to know how what happens in the US, how it affects what I do, and all of that. It's also important that you understand that not everyone can serve as a diplomat. There is a skill that comes with actually having to understand people and negotiate and all of that. And another reality is we do not exactly have enough positions. Like the diplomatic position is not like the operations area of cybersecurity where you can have as many roles as possible and all that. They have very few roles, so understand that not everyone can serve as a diplomat. However, what you can do at your end is to be familiar with these global conversations on cybersecurity. Make sure you make contributions when your opinion is sought. Sometimes we see surveys that says, "Oh, we want to know this and all of that." Find out the organization putting out the survey, make your voice heard. Not everybody gets a space at the table, but then if someone who has a space at the table asks for your opinion on it, don't just ignore it. Some of these things, because we've had issues where, especially in cybersecurity, if you work in cybersecurity, you have issues where management takes a decision that doesn't favor the people at the operations room. Not even talking about people, it's not even feasible, it's not something that is not realistic and all of that. So it's very important that you contribute your voice in when you are asked and all of that. And it's important that you are familiar with some of these things. You cannot just say, oh, I'm a penetration tester and all you're interested in is just being on your computer and exploiting or doing whatever you want to do. One day a law is going to come that's going to affect what you do. So it's very important that you're interested in this conversation. The goal of diplomacy, the goal of everybody, goal of cybersecurity in general, is to have an open, secure, stable, accessible, and peaceful ICT environment. That's the ultimate goal. If you work as an analyst in an organization, you want to ensure that your organization's network infrastructure is safe and secure and is accessible anytime it is needed and all of that. Wherever you are, your goal, whatever organization that you work with, you want to ensure security at that level. Now, for cyber diplomacy, the goal, we want to ensure security at a global level. We want to ensure that the cyberspace is secure and stable for everybody because we have children on it. While we have organizations, we have children on the internet and all of that. So we need to ensure some of these things are put in place. It doesn't matter what area of cybersecurity you operate in, we all have a part to play in achieving this goal. As we commonly say, cybersecurity is our collective responsibility. Whatever it is that you do, in any way that you are in this domain, it's our collective responsibility. Everybody has a part to play. All of that. That brings me to the end of my presentation this morning. If you want additional knowledge on cyber diplomacy, the UN Office of Disarmament Affairs has a course that talks about the 5 pillars of the GG. That's going to give you a deep understanding of what diplomacy is. Also talks about the norms that have been adopted at the UN level and talks about common threats and all of that. Yeah, so thank you very much for giving me your listening ears. I sincerely apologize for the network interruption and all of that. So now I'll be glad to take your questions, Ash.